Hi, today we are talking about chapter A.2 Adding Integers. Example 1, using number lines to find sums. Now I want you to think of positive numbers as going towards the right on a number line, or increasing a number, adding a number. And I want you to think of negative numbers as going to the left on a number line, or taking away, or subtracting. So here, find 4 plus negative 4. So we are going to start at positive 4, and we are going to the left, negative 4. So we're going to add in, moving to the left, 4. So that will mean 1, 2, 3, 4, and we land at 0. B, find negative 1 plus negative 3. So we're going to start at negative 1, and we are also going to move negative 3, which means to the left 3. 1, 2, 3. That lands us at negative 4. Part C, find negative 2 plus 6. So we start at negative 2, and we are putting in a positive 6. We know positives means going towards the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That gives us positive 4. So if we take a look at all three of these, we'll notice that opposites added together will give us 0. Adding two negatives together will give us a more negative number. And for part C, it kind of depends on the problem, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. So we've got some rules. Adding integers with the same sign tells us we're going to add the absolute values of the integers, then use the common sign. So what that means is if we're adding two positives together, we're going to add those numbers together and keep the answer positive because they're both positive. If we have two negative numbers, like negative 2 plus negative 5, these have the same sign. So we're going to take the absolute value of the two numbers, which is 2 and 5, and add them together to get our digit. And we're going to keep our answer negative. We keep the sign. So over here, I'd like you to write a little note for yourself. Same sign. I want you to find the sum and keep the sign. Sum means just add the two numbers together and keep the sign of whatever those numbers have as their sign. What if we're adding integers with different signs? Subtract the lesser absolute value number from the greater absolute value, then use the sign of the integer with the greater absolute value. So we have 8 plus negative 10. These have different signs. So we are going to find the difference of the two absolute values. The difference between 8 and 10 is 2. And we're going to look for the sign of the integer with the greater absolute value, which is negative 10. The absolute value of negative 10 is 10. That's a greater number than 8. So we're going to keep it negative. I kind of want you to think of this as a game of tug of war. Which number is going to be able to pull further? The negative number pulls further because it has the bigger distance from 0. Therefore, our answer will be negative. Let's test it on this. We have different signs, one negative, one positive. We find the difference between the absolute values, so 13 and 17, the difference between them is 4. And we want to think of who has the bigger pull, who would win in tug of war. 17 would win, it's further from 0, therefore our answer will be positive. So please write this note on the side. If you have different signs. You are going to find the difference and keep the sign of the greater absolute value number. Next part, additive inverse property. The sum of a number and its additive inverse or its opposite is just going to be 0. So that takes us back to part A up here. 4 plus its opposite is just 0. So when you add opposites, you'll get 0. So as a quick refresher, when you see an addition sign in a problem, you want to decide, do these have the same sign or different signs? Once you determine that, you will decide which rules you want to follow. Okay, example 2, adding integers with the same sign. So now let's apply those rules because we're not always going to use number lines to help us. That would take a lot longer when we have more complex problems. So we are finding what -4 plus -2 is. Well, these have the same sign. They're both negative, right? This is negative and this is negative. So because they are the same sign, we're going to find number 1, the sum, and number 2, keep the sign. So this is going to give us, let's see, the sum is 6, right? 4 and 2 is 6, and we keep the negative sign that they have because we know if we're starting on a negative number and we're going more negative, we're going to land in the negative portion of our number line. Adding integers with different signs. So we know the rules are, if they have different signs, we find the difference and we keep the sign of the greater absolute value number. Okay, because we're going to see both signs because they have different signs. So we need to decide which one. So we're going to find the difference between these. I see this one is positive and this one is negative, so they're different signs. So I'm going to find the difference. The difference between 5 and 10 is 5. And then which number would win in a tug of war? -10 would win because it's further from 0. So we get -5. Part B, we have a negative number and a positive number, so those are different signs. We're going to find the difference between the two numbers, the absolute value. So 3 and 7, the difference between them is 4. Those digits is 4. And who would win in a tug of war? 7 would win in tug of war because it's a greater absolute value number than -3. Therefore, our answer will be positive. You guys can kind of see the work that I'm showing and how I'm keeping my notes over here. This would be a great way to show your work. Okay, next. These are additive inverses. Also known as opposites. Therefore, our answer is going to be 0. Okay, last example. Modeling real life. The list shows 4 account transactions. Find the change in the account balance. So we're going to start with, we're at 0. And then we're actually going to go to -40. So we're actually going to start at -40. Then we are going to deposit, which means put in 50. Then we are also going to deposit 75. And then we are going to withdraw 50. So that represents -50, right? Withdraw means take out, deposit means put in. Now here's the cool thing. Because we have all addition, we can use the commutative property of addition, which you learned earlier in the year, which says we can rearrange the order of these numbers. So I can actually put in the negative numbers together. and the positive numbers next to each other. Another thing that you might think to do is to also see that these are opposites. Therefore, this piece will equal 0. So you've got a couple options on how you want to do this and what works best for you. I'm going to go with the two opposites being next to each other is just 0. So I'm left with negative 40 plus 75. This is a negative number. This is a positive number. So I'm going to find the difference between those different signs. We find the difference, difference. So the difference between 40 and 75 is 35. And we look at which number would win in tug of war. 75 would win because it's a further number from 0 than negative 40. So therefore, our answer is positive 35. That is our account balance. That's what's left in the account. So again, just as a trick to remember these, same sign, sum. Notice how similar those two words are and the sounds of them. Different signs, difference. Again, notice the very similar sounds for these two words and the very similar letters. You would use these two rules when adding integers. And that is the end of our A.2 Integers, adding integers notes.